And we're recording. All right. Hello, everybody. Today I'm joined by Antinatalist Outreach, who is well, how would you describe yourself, AO?
A human being, a concerned, who basically thinks suffering sucks, and yeah, thinks this world is a hellish place, and yeah, I'm kind of switched on to that, and I just wish more people were.
Yeah. So I wanted to invite you on to talk about a couple of topics. One, you consider yourself an antinatalist activist, is that correct?
I don't really like to say I'm anything really, because that kind of pigeonholes me, puts me, places expectations on my demeanor. But I think it's fair to say that I do try to spread awareness of antinatalism. Yeah.
Yeah, you do try to spread awareness of antinatalism, so it's like a type of advocacy for antinatalism. I mean, your name is
Yeah,
Antinatalist Outreach, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So, but, that is my goal, is to spread awareness. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Um, I wanted to talk to you about the the nature of how we're well, okay. I'll start off with activism since we're starting there, because the other thing that I want to talk about is we've talked about this before about um like an idea contagion about how it's possible that certain ideas have a potential for harm. So that's the second topic that I'd like to talk about. But for
Right.
the first thing, how would you describe advocacy? Because like one thing that we were discussing before is I personally don't consider myself an activist, and you agree with that. However, Amanda considers me an activist. So um, there's some type
Well,
of classification there.
no, I think like when I said I agreed with that, I was like allowing you to, describe what you were, and I'm not gonna like, if that's what you think, then I'm not gonna tell you otherwise. If that's how you see yourself.
Okay, you're
To
kind of like
me, you're
holding
some
space for my truth.
yeah. To me, you're somebody who is questioning reality, and you're looking for answers, and you do take suffering seriously. I would call you an antinatalist. And I think that the service you provide to the world, if I can call it that, is kind of one of is an academic pursuit of the truth. And you are somebody who I would say is on the philosophical side, trying to find that phrase, the silver bullet. You're trying to find the ultimate argument. You're trying to batten down the hatches on that one argument that would be bulletproof, that would win all debates, and would be clarified and easy to understand for the general population. And that's what I believe we're trying to do in your, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like that when you're trying to talk to so many different people, and you are an avid reader, a consumer of the kind of academic side of antinatalism. So in a way, I suppose you're kind of an activist by default, if you like, because you are a very much needed, person in the antinatalist community,
Okay.
and your endeavors to find this truth, this clarity,
Yeah.
will ultimately help antinatalism, and help it become more digestible for the general populace. Yeah.
I want to highlight that word that you said, needed. What is your assessment about the state of affairs of antinatalism activism or advocacy, or the meme spreading of this philosophy? And why would you think that this would be needed? And like, what other things would be needed, or like, what do you think is going good so far or bad so far?
Well, it is a very difficult it's a difficult world in general. So there are obviously problems in all communications of stances on this reality. There are problems in communicating any perceived solution to those problems, and there are always people who will disagree with you, and there are always, unfortunately, people's toes you may tread on. There are people who will be hurt by things you say. And antinatalism is a very difficult, I feel, ideology, philosophy to talk about in the public domain, because it's literally going against nature, if you like. It's going against what is taught in major religions, in capitalism, if you like, in communism, in political movements. We're just kind of going against the grain. So yeah, it is a very difficult stance to put forth. The problem is, as I said, treading on toes, human egos, and also, let's be honest, the truth, the reality of this world is something most people run away from. They try to escape it through various means, and it's not something that is confronted. It's not something that is illuminated vigorously all too often. People like to have it spoon-fed in little bits here and there. But I feel like antinatalism can be like an overwhelming kind of brutalistic display of reality for people, and it can be very unsettling for them. So yeah, it is a very difficult sentiment to place in people's minds and hearts.
I may have skipped over some of that. So what do you think is good right now that's happening?
Sorry. I think what's good is the numbers in the community online growing. I'm not really on Reddit, but occasionally I look at it.
And yeah, they just hit 100,000.
Yeah, so when I first looked at it about 2 years ago, I think it was on 29,000, and now it's on 100,000. So yeah, that's great. And then we have quite a large amount of people on the various social media platforms, engaging in conversation about it. I think that there's a few projects that I admire, like your podcast, the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, and your own channel, ? I think it's great that you're engaging with quite respectable academics, and people who are interesting, people who are engaging and eloquent in the way they project their thoughts. And I just find the content is quite rich. And yeah, I think it's very professional, and it's a force. It's a force in terms of its ability to portray a message in a serious and effective manner. So I think that's great. I also, I think that we've also been in various kind of newspapers, and there's been a few different situations where I think it has even been on the news, on television and stuff. So that's great, and it's good that we have people like David Benatar, who've written books that are starting to become more widely known, and people like Raphael Stevens, whose PR stunt, if you like, went kind of global, and Amanda as well. She's done some fantastic work. So that is good. That there are people out there who are skilled in writing, skilled in if you like putting themselves out there. They're skilled in PR, if you like. And there are some fantastic activists out there, if you like, and people who really are great at getting out there. Very brave individuals, like I would say Social Experimentalist. I think he's one of my favorites, actually, for his kind of ability to get out there and ask the pertinent questions, ask people face to face these questions that are never really asked.
Yeah. What do you think are the bad things about activism happening?
Well, I personally find a few things very unsavory. I find the thing I find most unsavory is the messages on certain, I think, Facebook groups, and sometimes on Reddit, about disliking children, disliking babies or whatever. To me, that's definitely not something that is it's not antinatalist for me. It's because children are the innocent victims here. It's not their fault. So I don't think that's really something that should be utilized as a form of publicizing antinatalism. It's harmful to antinatalism, but it's also harmful to children to put that content out there and to in any way normalize the dislike of innocent vulnerable beings. I think that's atrocious. So, and I think that to me, any public utterance of hatred towards vulnerable beings, be they children, disabled people, whoever, I think should be condemned, because they are, as I said, vulnerable victims, and that they can't help the fact that they are who they are, or have been thrown into this world.
I agree with you
So,
on that. Yeah.
yeah.
Was there anything else? Because I had something to say about that.
Yeah, I would like parent hatred as well. In some regards, it's a difficult tightrope to walk, if you like. I understand the kind of it's a difficult game to play, because you kind of have to pull on heartstrings in activism, and if you want to do that, sometimes you have to say shocking things to kind of break the social conditioning, if you like. And sometimes those things that may be shocking can be deemed, unsavory or hurtful. So in regards to, talking about parents, I would say, you should always try to let people know that, it's not really parents' fault. We are being gamed by evolution, 3.5 billion years of DNA molecule replicating and tricking human beings into this terrible gamble of rolling a dice with somebody else's life. So I think we have to be more mindful of that, and really, I've come to realize that it's important to get parents on board. So that's why I'm very happy to hear of, antinatalist parents, so people who had biological children and then subsequently became antinatalist afterward. I feel like, to be honest, I feel they're the most powerful advocates, or amongst the most powerful advocates for antinatalism, because they have literally had children. They've done the deed, and I think it takes a remarkable individual to admit how they feel about that when they know that it could be viewed negatively. I mean, it's very easy for the general population to, you know, throw ad hominems at an antinatalist who hasn't had children. I mean, they can. There are any number of you know, misconceptions, if you like, they could throw at that individual, and kind of, you know, blame any number of you know, falsities, or for the reason they're an antinatalist. They can basically say they're an antinatalist because of X, Y, Z. For example, they might be infertile, they can't get a partner, whatever. So they're the easy things for you know, people in general to throw at an antinatalist. So that's why I think antinatalist parents are wonderful and very valuable members of the community. So I'm rambling, and I'm I hope that wasn't too convoluted.
Okay. So I wanted to mention about the first criticism of activism that you mentioned was the hatred of kids, right?
Yeah,
Um, I think there and hatred of parents as well. And whether or not and you mentioned that should be kind of called out. And I'm starting to, when it comes to the like people within the community, I do voice my opinion, but I don't really publish that type of content on my channel because I'm really trying to focus on the arguments. But at the same time, one of the reasons why I don't really engage a lot with vegan activism is because of some of the toxicity within those circles. And it's not in particular to veganism, it's in particular to any type of activist group that I've belonged to. And this is why I kind of distance myself from that word and that type of tribal kind of or ideological tribal environment where people can. Here's what I've noticed is that people by proxy tend to find a self-righteous reason to bully other people. And I've seen that in a lot of social justice contexts where they find a cause that are theoretically, technically correct, right? Like veganism is technically correct. I would say
yeah,
antinatalism is technically correct. Feminism is correct. Anti-racism activism is correct. You know, like all these things. But some people will take that and use that as an excuse to bully other people. And I think there's a possibility of a whether it's intentional or unintentional, a type of misogynistic nature when you're attacking women in particular. So when it comes to antinatalism, I noticed that there's a lot of hatred towards women, and it's not necessarily coming from men. So a lot
right.
of aggressive behavior I've seen from women shaming other women for breeding, calling them breeders, calling their
Right.
children sporgs or spawn or whatever,
Yeah.
crotch goblins, like, and
Yeah.
I think this is such a shameful act.
It
And
is. And sorry.
sorry, but what the odd thing is, people wonder why we're hated. How weird is that? That as a group, you know, we have these vocal people saying these things to other people, and then are saying like, why are we hated? Why won't people listen to us?
Yeah, we spoke about this before, and it is a huge problem. My main problem is that those type of things when people are, you know, picking on children, and we have to be mindful of you know, misogyny as well, because you know, a lot of social conditioning is, you know, the woman is told from a young age, like she's told like you know, fairy tales, you know, find a Disney prince and, you know, have a baby. Religion says it, you know, the narratives on TV express it, on the soap dramas and, you know, Hollywood movies. There is this kind of Disney narrative pushed out of a happily ever after that is possible. And I agree with you that it's not, as I said, it's not really anybody's fault, you know, which is why I think it's important to push antinatalism out there, because it's kind of like people are ignorant, really, but it's not their fault. It's not their fault. They're being gamed by the DNA molecule. They're also victims of conditioning in many various forms. And we're also victims of our own psychology as well. There are many things working against us. There's many different, we're being attacked by many different angles and manipulated by things outside of ourselves. So I am also deterministic. I believe in determinism. I'm quite, hard determinism. And from that, I obviously understand that it's not their fault in that context either. Like you could argue that because of determinism, I am an antinatalist. And the way I kind of view the world is we are kind of deterministic biological robots. And it is a kind of battle of the will, if you like, of these robots making these deterministic, enunciations. And it is a weird thing. And it is like one deterministic robot saying one thing and another deterministic robot saying another thing. And in a way, you could argue it's out of our hands. It's really just determinism. And I know that's a bit fatalistic. And I am a bit of a fatalistic person. Well, I'm an extreme fatalistic person. And I do fall into borderline nihilism quite a lot. But for me, suffering matters. So I'm not, an absolute nihilist. But I am also, unfortunately, mindful of the fact that we are battling it is a huge battle in terms of we're battling determinism. We're battling things that aren't people's fault. Indeed, us as antinatalists are only antinatalists because of that same phenomenon, determinism, that is shaping others in different ways. It's a huge mess. It's a huge problem. It's not easy. And all I am is somebody telling my truth as I see it. And that's really all I am, is somebody telling my truth, hoping that other deterministic robots might change their course because of my determinism. Yeah,
I hear you. The other thing that I've been noticing is a type of classism as well, that like a lot of people in the West, or it does, like people who are more privileged tend to blame poor people, and people in third world countries as well, for having more kids and not understanding the social political conditions that bring about those type of those outcomes, in particular if you don't have access to contraception or education or even freedom to your own autonomy. There's so many compounding factors, and to come from a place of judgment to shame and to somehow say that they're worse, it is so, to me,
it's ignorance.
I was gonna say problematic, but yeah, I'd say it's ignorance. Yeah.
In fact, I'd say it's willful ignorance. It's like an educated person who should know better. Like an educated person should know better than that. I'm very much against that narrative that is in some dark corners of the antinatalist community, that poor people are evil or in somehow that they're to be hated or despised for having children, when we all know that the history shows, the statistics show that in the developed countries, where people are educated and the standards of living are better, that the birth rates are going down. So clearly, it's about that. It's about improving living standards. It's about improving education and all the things that go along with that, like improving access to healthcare, family planning, having open chambers for discussion and debate where, there's a freedom of expression. All these things are so important. And that's the problem. The problem is there are disadvantaged people in this world, and these poor people aren't just in developing countries. They're also in developed countries. There are portions of every developed nation in the world that are very severely disadvantaged, and that's where you'll find the teenage pregnancies. That's where you'll find the single mothers. That's where you'll find the fathers with many children from various women, and it's always comorbid with other problems. Like there's unemployment, there's, as you say, lack of education, there's drug addiction, there's severe mental illness problems. There's a whole shebang of problems with it. So to blame these people, I think is the ultimate kind of victim bashing. We should be doing our utmost to lift them up, to lighten them. And to do that is to do that in a way that's not going to scare them off. I mean, if somebody's mentally ill or drug addicted or whatever, the last thing they want to hear is that they're an evil person or an arsehole. We should be trying to rehabilitate them and help them out of their kind of situation.
Yeah, and
that's the only way we're going to help.
I just wanted to say, like,
no, I'm finished that point.
So I know it sounds like I'm scolding antinatalism in particular, but I want to just articulate that I've seen this in multiple quote unquote like social justice, or I don't know what to classify it, but like
you're basically talking about the social justice warrior. That's the kind of derogatory.
It's used as a derogatory term, but it's just because I'm used to those circles, right? Like I did a lot of activism with feminist organizations, with vegan organization, animal rights stuff, and even anti-capitalist organizations and stuff like that. And I've seen this type of behavior in every circle, and so it's just like, I feel like it's just a human thing, but at the same time, so I want to give you an example of something that happened and in the animal rights world. I noticed a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, there was a couple of particular cases where there was fur shaming, right? Like during the fur campaigns, anti-fur campaigns, where a woman's walking down the street with her fur coat, and you'd give them a pamphlet and so on. But some people take it further, where they start to film the person and start berating them and start shouting at them, and then following them into stores, shaming them, and then they come back with this highly aggressive harassment. It's ironic because they're the same people that will say we got to stop street harassment while they're using a cause that is technically correct to bully other people and to harass other people, and then spread this on social media, and then everyone will justify that by saying, think of the animals. And then you can justify berating someone else for, name any cause. You say, well, this cause matters more than the harassment that we did to these people. And it depends on the context that you're in, obviously. Like if you're going up against Nazis, fine, that's a different case scenario. But people just going about their shopping business, right? And you have a grown-ass man trying to film you, following you into a store when you ask them to leave. And even some people go even further and start spraying paint on people, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, why don't they change their minds? Like it's ridiculous to me to think that you could be so aggressive and then think that, why aren't people listening to us? And I've seen this within the antinatalist world. And so when I talked about this with perspective philosophy, he's like, well, you should call out other vegans for shitty behavior. He didn't say it in those exact words, but this is why I don't like calling myself a vegan, because of the toxic behavior. But at the same time, I think there's a vegan society definition issue as well.
Well, the problem is the line. Where is the line? Because, as you say, it is acceptable to, berate Nazis, for example. This is the problem: the evaluation of that.
Well, that's the thing. Like people who see like the torture of animals, they see people who advocate, like who consume that as Nazis, right? They'll use the Holocaust example in animal rights a lot. And pro-lifers will do the same thing. They're like, babies are being killed, and I don't know, antinatalists are saying, well, this whole, every time you bring a person into existence, you're causing that suffering, right? And so it's like you can justify all of these things. And so you're right. It's like, well, where do you draw the line at what point of
this is the problem, and this is actually, for me, it's another reason I'm an antinatalist, is because there are all these arguments and lines, and like, we're always at a loss as a species to agree on evaluating morals, ethics, what's right, what's wrong, and that in itself causes aggro, it causes problems, it causes aggression and more problems. Just that mere problem itself causes more problems, and it's just another reason I'm I think opt out of this game, and don't bring anybody into it, because it just seems like the fighting, the fact that we can't ever agree, the consensus doesn't happen, and it's so emotionally charged, everything we do basically, and there's always somebody who takes offense, and they might be right to take offense, or they might be overreacting, but again, that's down to their subjectivity, I suppose, and their own personal experiences. And there is also the possibility of me gaslighting them, or saying, what, they shouldn't do that, when maybe they should. Maybe they have every right to. Maybe I'm not looking at it from the right angle. Maybe I'm, not open-minded enough to see that there's merit in what they're doing. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and it's one I don't ever know if we'll ever have a solution to it. But I do kind of think that it's basically the eternal kind of battle between good and evil, if you like, between right and wrong. It's the eternal kind of human friction between our peoples, of trying to find consensus, trying to put the right way of thinking forward, and that's kind of what we're all about. It's scary, it's messy.
So, oh, are you there still?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that the reason I'm hesitant of like calling people out, or trying to talk about this in general, is because, like, again, like when it comes to any of these things, I'd rather stick to the advocacy or the arguments or the philosophy and so on. But at the same time, I sort of like, I do think it's healthy if you have the energy and the spoons for it to, it's like a self check out or check in about calling out bad behavior, and the internal fighting. I think is a certain level of internal fighting is helpful for social movements. But at the same time, like if I was to do that, if I was to like dedicate time for that, I wouldn't be able to do other things, in my opinion. Like if I go on Reddit every day, there's something I'm always embarrassed about on that Reddit, right?
Yeah.
When I go into Twitter, there's always something I'm going to find embarrassing on Twitter. The Facebook group, name any space. There's something I'm like, it's cringe. And then other people post the antinatalist cringe, and it gets spread virally. And I watch it, and then I'm like, you're not wrong for calling out the cringe. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm embarrassed by it, because I'm like, this is my people. At the same time, this is the type of philosophy that I believe in. And like, yeah, you want to like look at the stuff behind it, but then I don't know. It's just a hard thing.
I think I think it is a good idea for antinatalists to kind of try and self-police. We are many of us are we're
You cut out there. Could you say that again?
We're emotionally charged beings who are very sensitive, and we care passionately about what we're doing. And we are only human. We may say the wrong thing sometimes. So it is good that there is self-policing within, our community. And I welcome it. I think that we should do it. People should, call each other out, and try to do it in a civil way. Even if you find it insulting, try to, talk to the person calmly, and show them, why perhaps what they're saying isn't the best presentation of antinatalism, if you like. So I think we should do that. It is positive, and it kind of helps the cohesiveness with, if you like, moving towards that silver bullet, if you like, presentation of antinatalism.
Yeah, the question is, who does the policing, right?
Well, I think it's just, this is a huge problem as well. I'm being a little bit Pollyanna here, because whilst I'm agreeing with you that we should do it and we should do it to each other, again, it goes back to that deterministic robot thing of, everybody's coming at shit from different angles and with different passions and different psychologies. And there's never really going to be consensus, is there? Unfortunately. And even if we cry foul, or we kick up a fuss about something, unfortunately, I've seen it time and time again, there will be people who support it. Even if we, vehemently are against it, there will be somebody somewhere, or a collection of people who oppose our views as individuals. So I really don't know the answer to it, only that I would ask people to try and to try and speak their truth in a civilized manner, and for.
I don't know if it's my connection or yours. You're cutting out. Are you there still?
Those things for me are a no-go, and should be, well, like, to me they're kind of like hate crimes anyway, like shaming people for things that aren't their fault. It's not good.
How's your internet connection? You're cutting out a couple of times there.
I'm very sorry. Let me just check. Hello.
Yeah, we can just continue going on, and hopefully it'll clear up.
Okay.
So I wanted to also talk to you about a type of, again, I don't know what the solution is. Like, every time I go on any antinatalist circle stuff, I just
well,
I
you see,
cringe.
Mark, this is
but that kind of sounds kind of elitist of me, right? Like I'm like looking down on others or something. But
what one question I have for you is, like, you say you're not an activist, and I understand what you're saying, but I feel that once you understand antinatalism, and if you take a position on it, you kind of, like, would you say you want to convince people to be antinatalists? Would you say that about yourself?
No.
You don't want to do that?
No. I think it's a good outcome. I think my goal is to have conversations about it. I want to open the door. It's up to them to walk through it.
So then I think it's fair, like, if you don't want to convince people to be antinatalists, then I would say it's fair to say you're not an activist then.
Good. Yeah.
Because I know Amanda says you are, but if that's your answer to that question, then yeah, I think it's fair to say you're not an antinatalist. I would question that, because I'd say that if you understand antinatalism, why wouldn't you be an activist? Why wouldn't you want to stop, suffering, or try and convince people? And I don't know. I question your answer to that, because I'm sorry, but I question your answer to that in that.
Listen,
I
okay, well,
don't
let me
know.
give you some historical context. I did animal rights activism for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And I spent like 4 hours a week on my weekends, talking to people, handing out leaflets, doing protests, and so because of that exact reason. To me, it looked like so abstaining from an unethical behavior is like the Direct Action Everywhere made a statement about this, which I don't agree with their organization, but they gave a thought experiment where you're like walking down a street and you see a person beating their dog. Veganism, or not intervening, is like the boycott. You're not getting involved. You're not participating in the abuse. That's veganism. Activism is going to the person and making them stop hitting the animal, stop abusing the animal. That's activism. And that motivated me to continue to do activist conversations and stuff like that. However, I noticed the more I did animal rights activism, the less persuasive that I was getting. I was in this one, I wasn't opening my mind to other people's perspectives. I was stuck in a script. It was like I had a script. Every time I talked about animal rights, it was a script, and I wasn't like actively listening anymore. And I'm not saying other activists do this. This was just an outcome that happened with me. And when I noticed with antinatalism is that you start with you get to the conclusion that it's harming another individual, and you want to stop that. I still talk about animal ethics. I still talk about antinatalism, but the method is changed to where I want to open the door. And I noticed, so let me give you an example. I have a friend who's a pastor. He's a Christian pastor. And actually, I have multiple friends that are pastors. And through our conversations, without me, because I actually think religion is quite dangerous. Okay. But I have friendly conversations with Christians. I have good relationships with a local church of mine. I go to like book clubs with them and stuff like that. There was a Christian apologetics conference, which had like, I don't know, it was like 500 people, or maybe even 1,000. I forgot exactly how many people there was. It was a whole conference, and they invited me to speak. And it was just to have a conversation on stage about some of the differences and similarities that we have. And it was a 15 minutes conversation, and it went well. After that conversation, a whole bunch of Christians came up to me and said, "You're the most friendly atheist we've ever met. All our interactions with atheists have been very bad. It's been a lot of online bullying." And I felt so embarrassed by that. And it's not the first time that's happened. It happened with veganism, and it happened with antinatalism, and it happened with any other group that I ascribe to, which is why when I'd rather start epistemically from a place of opening the conversation, open the door, the person walks through it if they want. And so maybe I'm just like skirting the issue by saying, yes, I'm an activist by opening the door. But
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
And you are also trying. You've kind of got the goal of convincing people is your kind of long like outcome that you want, but you're going about it the laborious way. You're doing the groundwork. You're doing the hard work. You're trying to tighten up the argumentation and stuff, and find the right way to present it.
Well, when it comes to atheism or it comes to veganism, I feel like there's such a long history of philosophy involved in those movements. When it comes to the philosophy of antinatalism, it's so new in my view. The idea is very, very old, but when it comes to the formulation of like an analytical argument, I find it relatively new in the academic literature. And this is where I'd like to work more on if I can get into that field.
Yeah. Just one other point I'll make on the activism side of things. I think outreach is a better kind of description of what I do in terms of activism. To me is kind of I suppose, practical display or physical activity in doing something, going somewhere. For example, vegans might lock a gate on a farm or a slaughterhouse, or do something, chain themselves to railings, or do any number of things. And with me, it's about words, and I don't know whether that could be considered activism. Would you consider that activism? Just talking or tweeting or writing aphorisms and stuff.
I don't know what activism is anymore. I think
Yeah.
I remember with the vegan stuff, I said, even just holding a meetup, like a picnic with a bunch of vegans, I considered activism, because you're fostering community, you're fostering support for one another to help the movement grow. And so like I don't know, it's like you can twist it to be anything that supports a movement, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, putting, if I could put your feet to the fire, if there's torturous harm happening to billions of animals, why don't you do animal rights activism? Like, at what point do you pick your cause and then ignore others? Because I feel like,
well, when I was in university, I did numerous kind of vegan activism
yeah,
and
but you don't
stuff.
do it now.
No, I
right?
don't do it now.
So when
And why
people,
don't I?
so people come to my stream and they're like, you can't be on the fence, Mark. And I'm like, well, first of all, you don't get to tell me what I can or can't do. But I understand, like, I sympathize with that type of mentality, because yeah, there's a ton of suffering going on. And I'm not saying abandon all causes, but you gotta like figure out, you have a certain amount of resources that you can allocate to what you're going to do in a day, right? And what you feel would be the most effective. And for me, I think what's going to be effective is for at least with antinatalism, hopefully in the long-term goal, is to participate in the philosophy itself, like academically, at least. Like, that's the field that I want to go in. So like, I want to work on the framework. And what's the long-term goal? Spreading the meme. So technically, is it like, I want to go and convince as many people? Like, I just want to work on the framework first, and then like work on the other things. Like with the vegan stuff, I have minimal desire to work on the framework, because it has such a long history of people working on it. So yeah, like I don't know
understand
what
you're saying. I just think, for me, online is beautiful. You can literally get inside people's living rooms for free, and you can do that through social media. And yeah, you can pop up unannounced on people's feeds. So in terms of getting out there, I think we're we have got an amazing opportunity now to spread that meme, as you say. Question is how to do that. It's a difficult one. There are no clear answers. And again, the other side to it is we are all completely different. And, there might be people you deem unlikable or whatever in their kind of conversations, or, what they write online. But I suppose like attracts like, so they might attract individuals like that to be antinatalists. So at the end of the day, I suppose, as long
that's
as
like the byproduct of any movement that gets big enough, right? Like you're going to have subsections like that.
I suppose if you want to concede something, it's like, well, as long as people are becoming antinatalists, well, that's what really matters. But yeah, as I say, I am fatalistic. I am worried. I am determinist. I believe in determinism stuff. I don't see a good ending for humanity. I worry about the future all the time. And I worry about the effectiveness of talking about antinatalism. I worry about whether I should be looking into other things. And indeed I do. I look into transhumanism, medical ethics, right to die, disability rights, animal rights, rights for all vulnerable people and oppressed communities. So yeah, just because you're an antinatalist doesn't mean you should take your foot off the pedal in regard to other very important, and critical movements and pushes for equality.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, when it comes to the activism stuff, one thing that, not a lot of people are willing to put their name out there, right? And
Yeah.
I think that hinders some of the credibility as well. And I'm not blaming anybody who doesn't put their name out. Honestly,
Yeah.
if you ask me, I actually regret putting my name out there. I think it was good, that I put my face and my name out there. I don't show my video because the first time I had a video on my YouTube, a bunch of people started sending nasty comments, and I was like, okay, well, you know what, I'm just going to bypass that because I care about the knowledge in the conversation. But like, my picture's out there, my name's out there, but the problem is these guilt by association things. So like the Daily Mail did an article with me. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I did see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the title was like, I forgot, like, if you could push a red button or something. The
Well,
guy
these
lives.
people want you to, yeah, it was some kind of
Yeah,
making out that they're crazy.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't mention blowing up the world or anything like that, but they interviewed another person who said he was a negative utilitarianism, and he was like, hey, this is a separate thing that I believe. And yeah, I think the logical consequence of negative utilitarianism is that we bring about the cessation of all sentient life. He didn't say it exactly like that, but I was like, antinatalism is about the ethics about creating sentient life. That's it.
Yeah.
All this
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
stuff, you're adding on other philosophies.
Well, my view on it is that it's like I view defilism, if I may call it that, as a kind of thought experiment initially. Like, I didn't view it as a practical kind of reality, or like possibility. Sorry, like I viewed it as a thought experiment, like as in asking, was a hypothetical red button that, like, I stumbled across, there and then, and if I pressed it, everything would just disappear and nobody would know it was about to happen, and everything would just disappear painlessly, instantly, and there'd be nothing ever again. Would I press it? And I answered yes to that, yeah, as a kind of thought experiment. But in terms of practicality and real life, it's a big difference. It's a big difference, and I think the problem is the consent, and the problem is also, the fact that people would know. Like, if you were a real, you'd have to seek consensus on this. It would be a huge undertaking, and it would leak obviously into the public domain, and it would cause terror, and it would cause mental anguish, and yeah, who knows what the hell would happen? Like, if people thought the world was going to end tomorrow, well, can you imagine the atrocities that might be committed if people thought, well, I can do what I want now? Can you imagine what the psychopaths would do in that situation? So yeah, there's very worrying, there's very worrying outcomes from the kind of ethical approach
Well, there's a
to
type of division within that philosophy of people who are saying this is just a thought experiment, to those who are saying we have an ethical obligation to bring this about. They don't know, exactly how right now, but that we have a duty to do it anyway.
Well,
that's the end goal.
Yeah, my view on it is this: like I wish we could, like, my personal wish is if we could do it from, like, convincing people to be antinatalists and not to have children, and then do that, like, in a peaceful manner with agreement and dialogue, and without violence, without all these things that I view as negative. And then the problem would be we'd be left with the animals. Like, what would we do if the last generation was left, and we had the animals left? Well, yeah, in my view, we'd have to help them out by creating the red button for them, for the animals. That is my view on that. But again, I don't think any of this is possible, really, unfortunately. I think in practicality, in reality, the human ego um, the drive,
Okay, but do you believe that we should be working towards building the red button?
um, I think there's too much. Like I wouldn't like to suggest people go away and start building one. No, I wouldn't like to suggest that people like virologists go away and like develop a virus to do something to eradicate humans or like I just no I want more dialogue on such things, and I want it to be transparent. I
So I
think
don't
we
want to
need
do the no true Scotsman thing because I know there's divisions and there's versions of antinatalism, and this is an obvious split in ephilism where people are like we have to work towards it, and some people who are saying this is just like a thought experiment that yeah I would do it, and but this isn't practical, this isn't possible. Um, I feel like ephilists have to work that out in their own community. Um, but I question whether or not why would you call yourself that if if there's that I don't know there's that differentiation, like the founder of apholism is arguing for this, but then people are disagreeing with the founder. And the question is, well, does he get to speak on behalf of it? I don't know. I mean, he came up with the term. Um and if people are going to deviate from the moral imperative, I don't know. I find it questionable. Like, I don't know how that works.
Well, I would say that the founder of a philosophy controls its narrative in terms of the kind of drives the mothership, if you like. And, anybody who leaves the mothership and goes in other directions has to call themselves something else, or, make out a kind of derivative kind of title for what they're doing. So, explain their difference. Yeah.
I'd like
Take
to explore
take
the
ownership.
philosophy, but like I can't even have a conversation with these people. Like I could probably have a conversation with people like okay, let me correct myself. I can have conversations with self-proclaimed deafilists, but I can't have a conversation with some of the more strident versions of it. The closest thing I can is Amanda and Eurydos. Um, but whenever this topic comes out, it's like I don't know if you've witnessed this, but there's quite a heated debate. I don't even know if I call it a debate. There's just like a tribal war between antinatalists and aphilists. Not all of them. I think it's just like a minority of vocal people in each group attacking each other. But
Mm.
have you witnessed this?
To be quite honest with you, I get so disheartened by fighting and you know what one thing that really disheartens me is just pedantic kind of arguments. People arguing over kind of nuances or you know
Define suffering. I'm sorry.
yeah, I find it wankery, and I find it like just kind of like egotistical point scoring, and yeah, there's quite a bit of that goes on, and that really irritates me.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't mind like exploring. I don't know. Like I
no, no,
get
but there are. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain individuals who
who are
take
just
it to
overly pedantic.
the extreme, and what I mean by that is kind of a narcissistic kind of puffing out of their chest, and it becomes like intellectual masturbation where they're trying to prove that they're better than others
Right, right,
intellectually,
right.
rather than trying to compassionately display empathy. It just becomes about academic kind of dick size comparing. So yeah, yeah, it demoralizes me, upsets me, and it makes me even more fatalistic and worried about the future. And it's another reason why I worry. I worry about the future, and I see the lack of consensus, the lack of union, the problems inherent in communication, the problems inherent in people who have experienced pain and suffering, trying to, garner empathy from others who haven't experienced. It's just existence is just fraught with so many problems. And yeah, that's kind of why I'm an antinatalist as an individual. But whether I can, change the course of existence and persuade, 8 billion other people to be antinatalists, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. And I don't think anyone will ever be able to do that. And to be quite frank with you, to be quite honest with you, I just see the future being a gradual decline. Obviously, yeah, we're going to be get technological advances, medical advances, etc., and we may get some, rudimentary utopia where there is, life is much better than it is now. But there always will be extreme suffering in some portions of society. And the truth is, we will face some kind of apocalypse for the species, and we will go extinct horribly. And the universe will end. We will meet our entropic decline, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be nice. But to me, it just seems like the inevitable outcome of all of this shit show. And it saddens me. And I feel very much sadness in my heart for, the people, the victims that get left behind to face that, terrible situation. And yeah, it makes me very sad as an individual mentally. It affects me mentally to think, how this problem is so huge. And I am just a little, metaphorically, I'm just a little ant on this, pale blue dot spinning in space. And yeah, everything about it terrifies me. And I'm rambling again, Mark, so I'll let you talk.
It's okay. Let me just get you back, because I wanted to ask you, I think I asked you about have you witnessed what I witnessed about certain people within the ephilism community and certain people in the antinatalism community going at each other? Have you witnessed that as well?
Oh yes, I've witnessed that. I've witnessed even people arguing over.
So on that, you witnessed that. Two things. I want to find out, what do you think about that narrative that's happening, and two, what should be done, or what ought to be done, or what would you like to see done, where the future goes?
I believe the best thing we can do is have these discussions openly and publicly online. The thing I'd hate to see is for secretive, clandestine groups, forming echo chambers, and I think that's very dangerous. I think that doesn't invite, criticism, and that can lead to huge problems. That can lead to indoctrination, that can lead to, ill-minded people not really realizing they're ill-minded because they're surrounded by other ill-minded people. So I encourage everybody to air their opinions publicly as much as possible, and to evaluate them based on criticism they receive, and that will help hone their ideas, and it will, at the end of the day, it leads to, I would say, a more right-minded approach to reality, and hopefully the best argument wins. The most the best, may the best argument win.
How can you foster open dialogue with people who don't that are kind of yelling at each other? Or okay, I'm saying that metaphorically, I don't, what I'm witnessing is not open dialogue or honest dialogue or civil dialogue between the camps. No, so if that's not happening, how do you foster that?
I just wish that's what I said. I said ideally.
Oh, you'd like that? Okay, yeah.
I'd like that, yeah. Well, I think it is down to individuals to critique people as best they can, where possible. This goes back to the self-policing thing we were mentioning earlier. I think that's very good, a good idea, and yeah, the world needs compassion, empathy, and love. The world needs kindness. The world needs all these what I would view as positive things. and needs understanding. And at the end of the day, we just need to talk to each other. And hopefully those conversations lead somewhere. As I say, I just encourage people to talk about it to each other. These can be very dark subjects, and they can go to very dark places.
Yeah, they're very dark topics. Yeah,
they can be, and they can lead to some terrible conversations. And in fact, I more I talk to you now, that the kind of I'm growing kind of in this conversation against closed groups. I think maybe everything should be out in the open. I think that might be
there's like a type of accountability when they're out in the open, eh?
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about people's names and stuff. I'm just talking about, a lot of the groups are closed. And again, is that a good thing? Are we creating echo chambers? Like, a lot of us have mental illnesses, depression, mania, schizophrenia, severe PTSD, trauma, personality disorders, you name it. I just question I just question whether closed groups is the way to go. Should we be more transparent? Should we be more open to outsiders talking to us, and them helping us see the light and us helping them see the light, and kind of trying to create a consensus somehow.
Yeah. One thing I don't know what more to say about the state of affairs of these communities. My personal thing is, like, I'm just trying to set up boundaries, but at the same time, I want to foster dialogue. So, for example, Daily Negativity, I've had multiple times on this channel. He's a pro-mortalist, antinatalist, right? I disagree with him on that, but we have conversations on it. Yeah. Life Sucks is a negative utilitarian, and I'm pretty confident he's an ethicist as well. And I've had conversations with him multiple times. And Amanda is like, the head honcho, one of the the top she made a whole movie on ephilism, right? And I have conversations with her as well, and it's like I'd hope that I can continue having discussions with people that we have disagreements with, but I worry sometimes, like, when people are defensive and tribalistic within their ideologies or their philosophies. And this is kind of why, like, I don't want to be a hard, like, the first question I ask you is, like, do you classify yourself as an activist? You're like, that pigeonholes me into a sort of label, and that's exactly how I feel about
I would say I prefer the word outreach to activism, but maybe that's because of negative connotations I have with the word activism.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And like, I actually prefer the word outreach. I just think it's more pleasant, kind of. I just don't think it's as loaded as a word.
Right.
It doesn't. Outreach doesn't. Activism can be kind of negative activism. Outreach sounds warm and fuzzy, and it sounds like you're trying to connect with others. Activism could be hurting someone, for example. I prefer the word outreach, and that's just a personal preference for me. And again, I might be deluded in my assessment of that, but it is just a personal preference.
Yeah, I respect that. No, I think I'm the same way. Like, I think the byproduct of what I do is a type of activism. But at the same time, I don't want to be pigeonholed into a particular behavior or a particular set of ideas. I want that freedom to do whatever the hell that I want. Without other people saying that you have to narrowly do this specific thing. And I'm like, well, no. I like fostering these types of conversations. But I don't know. I feel like maybe the pandemic's getting to me, but like, when I'm involved too much with a particular group, like, I see a lot of negative things, and maybe this might be a negative a selection bias. where I'm trying to also see the good. And um, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just the type of media that I consume. Whether or not it's like outrage culture or debate bro culture, um,
Mm.
and whether or not that'll do anything to my psyche as well. You mentioned that, like, you get sad about this, the type of in-group fighting sometimes, or the way
Like,
that's
can I just make a point on that? I don't like that's just the way I see humanity in general.
in
So
general. Okay.
yeah, it's not that I'm particularly sad about antinatalists fighting with and amongst each other. Like I kind of I'm kind of old enough to realize that is just the nature of humans.
Yeah, that's just part of our human nature. But like,
And
I,
like
I
it
wanted to
isn't just
ask
a
you,
problem.
like, has anti-nihilism outreach improved your life?
Has it improved my life? Do you know, this is interesting because I've always been a sensitive person. I don't know why that is. It's just the way I am. Like I've experienced tragedy and like trauma and all these things in my life, but a lot of people have, and they don't all turn out.
Oh, you muted yourself, man. You still there? You have yourself muted.
Raised
There you are. You're back.
stoic. My father. I was raised to, you know, face suffering and not complain. That's kind of how I was brought up to, I was brought up in a kind of strong, just be a macho kind of guy. You know, when I was playing contact sports, hit them hard so you don't get hurt, and just don't complain. Really, there was never much room for complaints or even emotional kind of conversation as a man. It just wasn't what was done as a boy in my family, in my community. So I would say I was a kind of stoic for many years, and naturally a stoic. And then I became an absurdist in terms of like I just viewed life as completely absurd, and I did become like a bit of a joker. And then I kind of realized, that yeah, there's no real meaning to it. It's completely insane, and humans are just these, well, basically crazy and deluded. I felt sorry for humans. We were in a terrible situation, and I just started realizing suffering matters. So anyway, I forgot why I started talking about this, but so just about my personal evolution from like being stoic to being like just viewing the reality as absurd to realizing that what, it may be absurd, but suffering matters. Suffering matters a lot, and I do kind of empathize with you said life sucks as a negative utilitarian, and yes, I do believe that we have to reducing suffering is more important than trying to maximize pleasure. Um, I just think that's. I don't know. Would you not consider yourself of that mindset? I know you're a Benitarian, but do you think that the kind of asymmetry is kind of based on that?
It comes across that way. Um,
This is why I like you, Mark, because I'm not a philosophical academic, So and I know I get badgered for that by some people, but
do you?
for me, it's obvious. Antinatalism is obvious. It doesn't need to be highbrow, but I do appreciate that it kind of does as well for the people who think like that. For me, it's simplistic and obvious, but I know there's other people who think otherwise, and that's why we need people like yourself who explore these things and try and reach out to these equally intelligent people who just see reality in a different way. And it's a difficult task, so I wish you luck.
Thanks. Yeah, I do consider myself like I for a long time I used to consider myself a negative utilitarian, but um I'm I'm shifting to a more like a social contract or a deontological approach. I know some people are a lot of people. I don't know. I've been seeing threshold deontology get thrown around. I don't know if I'm completely convinced by it, but I don't think the asymmetry is, in particular, one set of normative theory. I think it's supposed to be theory neutral, according to Benatar. But what I'd say is utilitarian or deontologist, whatever. I'm suffering focused, and I'd like to say that I'm a suffering like I have a suffering focus ethics. That's the kind
Yeah.
of general rule that I'd work with.
Yeah, I would consider myself in that vein as well. In terms of my outlook, obviously, I'm not a philosopher or anything, but in terms of my outlook, I would say I'm suffering focused. Um, you mentioned the social contract, and obviously, I have a very rudimentary understanding of all these things, but I've always found that concept, well, quite saddening as well, because of the whole consent thing, where none of us consent to being here,
Right.
and then there's all these expectations on us to behave in certain ways and do certain things. um, and yes, I understand that for the good of humanity that is necessary, but again, it's another burden placed on an individual. And in my in my mind, it supports the kind of fact that it is all an imposition. It is all an expectation that we never asked for.
I want to talk to you about a type of information hazard or suicide contagion, about having these conversations. And we've talked about this before in some of the hangouts. Can you expand on some of your thoughts about just uh, anti-nihilism outreach, right to die outreach, talking about death, talking about suffering, all this stuff, and the possible effects it has on the general populace or people within the community, and possible harms that it could do?
Yeah. I'll be quite honest. I don't really talk about suicide that much. I more when I do talk about it, it's in the kind of view that I feel sorry for people who commit suicide. In that, the trauma, the physical pain, the worries, etc., that drive somebody to do that. I feel that's the tragedy. The tragedy is the fact that people suffer so much in this life that they want to do that, and they do it. That's why I do talk about it. That's the only reason I talk about it. In my aphorisms, I only ever really talk about in aphorisms and stuff. I use it as a kind of, what, you have a child, you think life is great. Well, people commit suicide, and your child could be one of those people who finds life so terrible, and they suffer so much that they decide to end it because they don't view it as a gift. So why are you imposing that view on somebody else? And yeah, that's kind of suicide and stuff. Right to die. I mentioned this in a video before, I think once, because somebody kind of cornered me on it. Because again, I'm quite shy talking about these things because I am worried. I'm worried about, I'm just worried about consequences of my words, and it is a very difficult thing to, I find it very difficult to talk about certain things, and this is one of them. But I didn't talk about euthanasia, and I do support it. I am worried about consequences of it, in terms of, one of my worries is that if it becomes a kind of normalized, although I support it, like, I don't think anybody should have to suffer terribly. I think they should have the right, and they should be, they should have the right, and to choose their own time to go. Nobody should have to suffer terribly, basically. My problem is that given how I view humanity, and I am a misanthrope, and I am also philanthropic in my antinatalism, but given how I view humanity and the kind of beasts that are within it, I see negative consequences in terms of people being psychologically damaged by the prospect of euthanasia being available, in that, disabled and marginalized people might have an expectation placed upon them by society that, you're not a productive member of society, so you're a burden on taxpayers or your families. So the right and moral thing for you to do is to go. And I find that consequence like that, the psychological, trauma, if you like, that individual will suffer as a consequence. I find that frightening. And that is a worry for me. And it's also a worry that, we become this kind of conveyor belt of sentience where, we're kind of cogs in the machine serving capitalism or serving the elite. And, we work for a certain period, we consume for a certain period. And when we become, old and ill, etc., and no use, when we're taking more out than we're putting in to the system, if you like, well, then the expectation is that we are to die, are to euthanize, and I worry about these expectations that we will become even more dispensable, even more of an interchangeable cog in the machine, even more disposable. And that's a huge worry for me, that human life might become even more of a kind of thing to be utilized, thing to be used up and thrown away when it's no good anymore.
Yeah, someone used those words exactly. Maybe it was you. Did you see my videos on the right to die?
Yeah, we spoke about this in Hangouts.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, this is ringing a bell. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of my view, and it's a worry for me, but that doesn't take away from my view that an individual should have a right to choose their own destiny, if you like, or to choose their own outcome. I think the most important thing will always be political and humanitarian focused on this, and that we should never ever take our eye off that. We should always be mindful of the vulnerable in this world, and we should always protect them and keep their best interests in our minds and in our hearts, and basically provide safeguarding mechanisms where basically people aren't forced to do things without their consent. People aren't forced to do things without their acknowledgement of what is happening. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me so what I wanted to not pin down, what I wanted to ask you about was, I don't know who coined this term, like information hazard, or spreading information that is true, that could potentially harm others.
Yeah.
And so the way that I see it is, if you're talking about how terrible the world is or how terrible life is or whatever, it could motivate, or it could be, I don't know a good word.
Well, it could cause it could cause someone else to suffer, basically. And we don't know how that could happen, but they could get depressed, they could become suicidal, whatever.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
They could become aggressive to somebody else, go to drink, drugs, whatever. The consequences are infinite. Like we don't know what the hell could happen when we talk. But I find that to be generally the case in general. Like we don't know how our words will be taken in most circumstances. And that's why I think humans are very good at small talk and being superficial, because if we scratch the surface and start kind of describing reality, or talking about the nitty gritty, and describing our ideologies, describing our political, affirmations, well, then that's when the problems start. So this is the problem of being human. When we actually describe what it is to be human, it causes other humans to suffer, and that is inevitable. Unfortunately, it's a huge problem. It goes back to earlier: where do we call the line? Where do we say enough is enough? Where do we say you've said too much? And I don't know the answer, Mark.
Yeah, neither do I. I talked to a philosopher of death, Travis Timmerman, and I think I brought this up in the interview. It may have been recorded or it was after, and he said, people are going to seek out this content. So like if he's writing about the philosophy of death, people want to look into that type of material, right? Like people, it's not like it's involuntarily going to be read. it wasn't it gave me some comfort, but not totally. So like I still worry
Mm,
about when I talk about antinatalism or I talk about any of these things that it could potentially um uh, yeah, potentially cause someone to be even more depressed or cause them more dread in their life.
mm,
And for me, when it comes to the philosophy of death, it's like this term memento mori, probably pronounced that wrong, but it's like reflecting upon death sort of affirms life for me. Like I think
yeah,
about like what do I want to do before I go, like try and live every day as my last, so to speak. It's
yeah,
just death is
yeah,
always around the corner, kind of thing. So
yeah.
I never felt that negative about it, but that doesn't mean other people can't interpret that as being negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I just hope for the best. Like I don't know. Like I do my best. Like I think like on my streams I set it up as 18 plus, and
Yeah.
I don't know, like I don't know what else I can do, because having
Mm.
conversations about antinatalism and procreative ethics and the philosophy of death and medical assistance in dying, or all these, I don't know what you would call it, it's like these dark areas of philosophy, so to speak.
Yeah.
I find it like I find it interesting, and I find it
Mm. Like
it's rewarding
it's
almost.
like I've come to know you somewhat, and I like you very much. And I almost found you a little bit unnerving when I listened to you first, because you've got such a lovely voice and such a friendly manner. And I think, wow, he's speaking about these really dark things, but he sounds so happy. And I was like, what's going on? But people have said that about me sometimes on my channel as well. So it is interesting how we present these things, and I think that's kind of your strength in a way, that you present in such a friend with a friendly demeanor, yet talking about such serious, and we mentioned dark material that needs to be talked about, in my view. And in my view, there's no better way of doing that than with a friendly disposition, and an honest and open kind of good faith a way of conversing with people. So yeah, keep doing it. I've said that to you before, so.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I can continue to it. I do worry whether or not I get um, I don't know if my method changes, but I don't know. I'm just the way that I
Well,
said, I'm just like riding a wave, and we'll see where the wave takes me.
yeah, and we it is interesting. It is difficult. Um, in terms of what I try and natter about on my channel, like I try to mix it up here and there with just like most of my stuff, like basically nearly 90% of it is just off the cuff kind of, if you like, even impulsive like chat from me, like where I just start recording there and then. There's no preparation, and it is just off the cuff, if you like. Um, so
I like
I've
that,
said
by
it.
the way.
Yeah, I don't kind of know what I'm going to say when I start recording. I think, well, I haven't said anything for a while. I better say something. And it's for me. Yeah. You asked me, have I improved my life from it? Well, I have, in a way, faced some very, very dark thoughts head on, if you like, with vigor, and if you like, obsessively and repetitively. Um, and yeah, I've had depression in the past. If you like, I am a depressive realist in that I view reality and it makes me depressed. And I think I've always, had this depressive realism, and it has come, like I've kind of dealt with it in different ways in the past, in terms of being funny, being a joker. For a while I was addictive in certain aspects of my life. I've mentioned that before. Sex addiction, if you like, exercise, partying, consuming fucking comedy, consuming escapism in terms of film and reading and stuff. Uh, so in terms of facing reality, antinatalism has been helpful in that regard, and I found it somewhat comforting to realize there are other people who feel a bit perturbed about this reality that we're in. It's not just me, and it's not, totally abnormal. I'm not like for many years I felt a bit like an alien, who woke up on this planet where everyone else was a different species to me, and I just felt like I was the chalk and they were the cheese. And I'm kind of glad I found the antinatalist community in that regard. In that I find many kindred spirits, if you like.
That's the one common thing that I've heard from a lot of people is that when they found these communities, they finally found like kindred spirits, and
mm.
they no longer felt alone in their belief.
Yes, I would say sometimes it's both a comfort and a curse, in that yes, it's comforting sometimes, but then also sometimes when you do see yourself and others, it can be I would say uncomfortable as well, because you everybody is trying to pursue happiness, I suppose, or well-being in their life, and I suppose it can be discombobulating to see others suffering like you, and to realize actually this is a huge problem and nobody has the right answer here. So nobody has a solution to this. So in that way, it can be a bit overwhelming at times, in that, we live in a kind of, well, more so in America than here, but in America, everyone to me, it seems from an outsider looking in, it looks like a kind of Pollyanna culture where it's like uber positive, if you like, toxically positive, and it's encouraged to look on the kind of bright side of life. So I find that a sickly disposition, and I can't do it myself all the time. But yet we do need to do it if we want to survive sometimes. So that is the if we want to live, we do have to retain some element of positivity somewhere or other. For me personally, one of the positives in life is trying to reduce suffering in my own life and in the lives of others, and in by others I mean all animals, including humans. Antinatalism is a huge part of that for me. I think that one of the other benefits of antinatalism is that it really pushes out there many different questions about what it is to be human. And I think that one of the other consequences of antinatalism is really, holding parents and humans to account, in that, parents have to start realizing that, it's a big deal to create life. And perhaps when people start realizing that, they may be better parents. I know that's kind of not the ideal outcome, in that we don't want people to be parents, but perhaps one of the consequences of antinatalist publication will be that when people do become parents, they will realize the kind of grievous bodily harm they've done, and the fact that they have to try and bring that child up with love and affection so that they won't become antinatalists. So yeah.
How did you even come across all this, by the way?
How did I come across all this? Well, I was familiar with Benatar, and that was kind of my first kind of came across.
How did you come across Benatar?
I was online one day, and just someone mentioned, his book, Bet Never to Have Been, and I was like, what's that? And I was like, that sounds weird. But that was my first, I never heard of the phrase antinatalism before. I had these thoughts. I've described this before. I'd had these thoughts. I've had a very weird journey through life, like in terms of, as I said, I was kind of stoic, absurdist, and depressed as fuck, and manic, all the different emotions you can be. And so I formed these views myself in absentia from the community. And then I happened across Benatar. I didn't really look into it more deeply than glancing through his book. Then in terms of the community, I remember Raphael Stevens had a huge I couldn't believe that someone was doing the publicity about it.
I think
That
it's
was the
Samuel,
first
by the way. I think it's Raphael Samuel.
Yeah, Raphael Samuels. Sorry, Raphael Samuels. Sorry, is like, what is it? Nearly 3 a.m. over here. Raphael was a huge deal for me, and when I saw him, doing his publicity, I thought, wow, fuck, that man's done something good there, and. I saw it as a kind of PR stunt with a good message.
Yeah.
And I admired that. And that's when I set up my Twitter and my YouTube. And I didn't, honestly, I had no idea that there was a community of antinatalists online. No idea. And basically, I chose the name. And then I think a few months later, I realized there was a community on Facebook called Antinatalist Outreach, and I felt really bad. And I remember I asked the people who founded that, like, if they wanted me to change my name, and they were like, no, it's okay. So I left it at that.
Was that ethicological?
Sorry,
was that
ethicological? Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's how I kind of got into it on Twitter and on YouTube. And then I found all the others and yourself, and
how'd you find me?
It has become part of... How did I find you? Well, I was watching you from across the street, as I usually do, and I can't, Mark. I was thinking about that the other day. I can't quite remember, but I think it's like I can't remember how I found anybody really. Which is funny because I talk to everybody quite a lot now. Like, a lot of the people. I can't remember the first time I heard Amanda's channel. I can't remember anything. It was just this kind of big blur in, I don't know, was it 2018 or something, 2019? And I remember me and Flyora used to chat quite a bit when I kind of started on YouTube first. I found her interesting, and a sensitive, kind soul who I empathized a lot with in terms of, suffering that she'd been through. And I find it, I've always admired the kind of people who put themselves out there, like you, Amanda, Flyora, and there's many others. I find them very brave and very unusual characters, in that it's not normal for people to air their kind of, vulnerability. I really admire that, and
yeah, me too. Yeah,
I really, really admire it. It's beautiful to me that people do that, and I think it's really empowering to other people. And I really, I hope that anybody listening to us nattering on here today, I just want everyone to be okay. I know that sounds a bit soppy and everything. I know it probably even sounds delusional, but I just want the best for people. And it's better than ever have been, obviously, in my eyes. But whilst we're here, we have some serious work to do in terms of trying to better the lives of each and everyone here, and trying to clean up this shit show. Yeah.
Nice, man. I think that's a great way to end the conversation.
Well, yes. Thank you for having me on, and I really wish you the best luck with your endeavors. And I hope that one day, you'll write something, book, and put to good work all your kind of research and interaction with many, many different types of marvelous minds. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, and you too. Keep up the good work, and your outreach, and best regards.
And don't be afraid to critique me now and again. And I do welcome this from everybody. Thank you for anybody who's ever critiqued me and stuff. It does make me think, and I do encourage more of that in our community. And as I will say again, I will reiterate, and I think this came from our conversation today, I would like to see everybody being a bit more transparent and stop hiding in the shadows, and that includes people on Discord and stuff. Get into the public domain on Twitter, on Instagram, and YouTube, and air your thoughts if possible, if you're not too shy or you're not too anxious. And seek communication with others is what I'll say, even those outside of antinatalism, because that's the only way we're going to reach that silver bullet, if you like, reach the consensus that we're all looking for. Okay.
Cool. Take care, buddy.
Thank you. You too. Bye
Cheers.
now.